We are live. This is week number 7.
Yes, sir.
I am Bubba,
I'm Cat.
and we're gonna figure out how hot it is where we're going. But this week we're gonna talk about barbecue.
Word up.
You like barbecue, man?
No, do I look like I'm a fucking vegetarian? No. Yeah, of course.
Never.
Who doesn't?
Never trust a skinny chef.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, there it is. So we can share. Do you believe in life after love?
No singing.
I asked if it was share.
No, not like that.
All right. And now I'm
figure
not
out
sure what
I gotta share this.
I'm not sure what to do from here, actually.
Let's
So
see.
we're gonna go for it. Boom.
I gotta share this first. I
just shared it to myself.
I gotta tell people that
Yeah.
we're live, man.
But I shared it from. So basically,
Okay.
what we're going to talk about while we're figuring this out, we're here to talk about barbecue and smoking stuff, like food stuff, not weed.
Love food stuff.
Weed, smoking weed's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But it does make you hungry for smoke stuff.
So, I guess first we'll just talk about barbecue in general. It basically came from the Caribbean.
Okay.
Is where it all started. These, the natives there, when the Europeans arrived, they found that the natives there were digging these pits on the beach with hot coals in the bottom, and they'd throw in a live pig and cover it with leaves and come back the next day and had delicious meat.
Right.
It was cooked, it was juicy, it was tender, and it was smoky, and they had, of course, all their spices going and all that.
Right. So gross.
They liked it, but they took it and, not to get too detailed, because we only have an hour here, ish. But, they took it and it's evolved into this thing where you smokers and, it kind of leans into grilling a little bit and things like that. And it's a big deal.
Right.
People like it. People love to do it. The competition world is just going,
Right. Yeah.
berserk right now. But so it that's where it started, though, when the Europeans first came into the Western Hemisphere and they found it in the Caribbean.
Cool. And I'm going to say again, this is delayed really bad on here. We're not sure why. It seems to be a Facebook thing. So if we don't get to your questions right away, it's because we don't see them right away, or because you're not hearing us right away.
Yeah. So we'll just, if you have questions, get them on the video. We'll answer them when we get to them. We may not,
Oh
if
no!
If we don't get to your question, it's maybe because it was not the best question.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, we've had a couple of those, but it's good, So yeah. So smoker types. I had one of those little red Weber ones. Couldn't keep it hot all the time. I always use that one in the winter too, which is probably a problem. But so I've got a gas one, and I've been able to smoke all the time with it. But so what are the advantages and disadvantages to the main types of smokers?
When you talk about smoker types, and I'm going to split it up because the question that came through was kind of a combo question. What's the best kind of smoker? And then they mentioned charcoal, electric, gas. Well, I'm going to separate smoker types from fuel source.
Okay.
Right? Or how you heat it. So there's a lot of different kinds of smokers, and they come in all shapes and sizes and price points and all that. But your basic, first you start with like your upright smokers, or even like a 55-gallon drum. Weber makes a product called the Weber Smoky Mountain, which it's pill shaped. Really, there's 3 different sizes, where your heat is on the bottom, and now they're meant to be a charcoal heat source smoker.
Yep.
All right. People have built modifications that they put a heating element in the bottom, and it's an electric smoker. But like you can only really do that on the small one, because the size of the big one is you can't possibly heat it with an electric element.
Right. Gotcha.
You burn
Unless you insulate the shit out of it.
Yeah, you burn your house down with the barking. So, and then, you move into like your offset, which looks more like a grill, but there's a big box on the end, one end or the other or both, or in the back, where you provide either a fire with logs or charcoal.
Okay.
A charcoal heat source. Generally, on like the professional barbecue circuit, they're called stick burners, because most of the guys that use them put logs in. That's their heat and their smoke all in one. They put out really good food, and inside the cooking chamber, there's various configurations. Some, the smoke flows through the chamber and out the stack. Some, it goes under a baffle all the way to the end and then has to come back over the food. So you have even heat underneath, and then the smoke moves over the food and out the stack. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. If with the ones with the baffle, obviously, are more expensive. They take a little more engineering. There are more materials in it.
Right.
That just more expensive, but
sure,
they work well. You see them a lot. And then you have your cabinet type smoker,
which would be similar to mine, right?
Similar to yours, where the heat source can be propane, possibly natural gas if you have the adapter, electric, or possibly charcoal.
Okay.
You generally don't see wood fuel source
right
in that type of smoker.
No. Would you say those are more of a beginner smoker?
I would say electric and propane are probably more beginner, because there's a little bit of a learning curve to charcoal, although it's not much. And then if you wanted to move into like a wood fueled smoker, that takes time to actually learn how to use the smoker,
right,
and figure out, how often do you have to put a log on to maintain this temperature,
right?
Because the number one thing in barbecue is a constant temperature.
Right.
You want to maintain that constant temperature for as long as possible, because some of these big pieces of meat take, depending on the size, can take up to 24 hours.
Right.
So you want to keep a constant temperature.
But I mean, a cabinet type, to me, seems like a beginner, like I have, because it's easy. You open the door, you have a fuel source that's easily maintained.
Right.
There's not much to it, and that's the way I like it. And I still screw it up because I don't keep that close of tabs on it. So all of a sudden, I'll look out there, and my water pan is empty, and the thing's smoking just nasty grease smoke all over the place, and the temperature skyrocketed because that grease got so hot. And put a little water in it, and everything's fine. But I don't babysit them enough.
I had this same experience as you, and I quickly got rid of the propane smoker.
Yeah,
I just didn't. It ended up being too big of a risk with that open flame in the bottom of the smoker.
Sure.
And that's what I
risk
would
of
say.
What?
Fire.
Yeah.
Because you can ruin more than just your meat. You can
burn your deck down.
Your house down. You can, you have grease fire in that. And not that charcoal won't start a grease fire, but the chances are a lot less.
Right.
But you'll burn up if you use a probe for temperature. You'll burn those up.
So Mark asked, what about buffalo chips?
They'll make your brisket taste like shit. No lie.
But they not for smoking, but you can light them on fire, right? I mean, isn't that what they say? You can light buffalo shit on fire.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not to cook on, but
right? It's a fuel source for sure.
That's crazy
because most of it's like just dried grass, and stuff in it.
Yeah, that's insane.
So, but you put that in the smoker, your brisket's gonna taste like shit. So.
Good question there, Mark. Just kidding. So, what else you have on those? So there's those, and what is your favorite type of those of the smokers that you've used?
My favorite type at this point, and it could change. I might find, a smoker that is a different style that I just absolutely love. But right now, I'm a big fan of the upright. I have a Weber Smoky Mountain at home, and I've used when you make a 55-gallon drum into a smoker.
Mm-hmm.
In the online they call it an ugly drum because they're not pretty.
Right.
You can fancy them up. You can put a little high temp paint on them or whatever, but they work well.
Right.
And
but same thing. The fuel source on the bottom of those.
Fuel source is on the bottom, and the key to that is airflow. So you have vents at the bottom, and you have a vent at the top. So air goes in the bottom, fuels the charcoal that's in the bottom to keep it burning and lit.
Right.
And the smoke exits the top. Well, that movement of that air causes it's a vacuum effect. So that exiting air actually pulls more air in.
Right.
So you work with this smoker that you have, and you figure out where the vents need to be to maintain a constant temperature.
Right.
On a Weber Smoky Mountain, it's pretty easy.
Right.
To figure out.
And you told me a couple weeks ago they actually have devices now that will do all that for you, right?
Right. So even though you can get those vents set and your temperature is going to stay fairly consistent, it's nice to get a little sleep when you throw a brisket on at midnight for lunch the next day.
Right.
So they have devices that will maintain that airflow for you, where you actually seal all the bottom vents except one. It's a little controller. You put a temperature probe in by the food that monitors the temperature inside the smoker, and as it cools down, it pumps air in for you to stoke those coals, raise the temperature, and then when it gets hot enough, it reduces the amount of airflow.
Now, are those legal to use in competition?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. And I can only speak to KCBS, which is the Kansas City Barbecue Society. There are other organizations that sanction barbecue competitions, but I don't know their rules.
Right.
The Kansas City Barbecue Society specifies that your fuel source has to be wood or charcoal briquettes. The airflow in your smoker can be maintained electronically or digitally.
Okay.
That's fine. And a lot of people they argue against that. They really don't like that.
Right. I could see that.
They think
they
think it takes away from the actual competition.
That's like chili competitions. A lot of them are no bean, right?
Right.
Because the original chili was not made with beans.
So, and then but since there's another type of smoker that's kind of a hybrid device called a pellet grill.
Right.
Or smoker, which monitors the temperature inside and feeds wooden pellets into a hopper where the wood is actually burning in the bottom of that.
Yeah.
So your heat source is actually wood. It's just automatically feeding that when it needs to keep the temperature up, and you just keep the hopper full. And
that'd be good for restaurant businesses and things like that, right?
And a lot of times when you go to a barbecue restaurant, if it's the kind that, if you don't see smokers sitting out back, they probably they're either pellet fueled or they're gas or electric.
Or even artificial, right? I mean, they could be artificial smoke.
Right. They could boil them in liquid smoke for all I know.
Right,
but,
yeah.
Yeah. When you run across that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Dehaven. Jesus.
Oh, look at that. Fuck, I haven't heard from that guy forever.
He is
that
safe
guy's,
at third. That guy's on his way to Sturgis. I'm sure he's...
Hey, don't be Facebook Living on your motorcycle, David.
Yeah.
Jesus. So your favorite smoker right now is
the upright, either an ugly drum or a Weber Smoky Mountain.
All right. Do you have experience with a hot box smoker? Have you used them before?
Briefly. It's been a few years, but it worked.
So like the one I showed you, you said the metal was too thin.
Yeah.
So that is lets too much heat out. Right. It doesn't keep the heat.
It's too hard to maintain a temperature inside.
So what would you use for a hot box smoker? I mean, would you buy one or would you have one made?
Personally, I would buy one if I were to.
Because you'd think a 55-gallon drum would be pretty cool for that too. You know,
I've seen people mount them sideways.
Cut the lid up and then put a big heavy box on the side.
Oh.
I like a hot box.
So Troy likes his Green Mountain. Green Mountain makes a great pellet grill. And literally with a pellet grill, you set the temperature. It's a digital readout. You set the temperature and you walk. It's like an oven.
Right.
More or less. And a lot of people say that you don't get the same smoke flavor because the pellets burn fairly clean.
Right.
But at your lower temperatures, around 200, 185 to 200, you get enough smoke. And on those longer cooks with like brisket and pork butt, you get plenty of smoke on it.
Sure.
So
wood types. There's a million wood types out there. Does it, the type of meat that you're smoking, depend on what type of wood you should use? Or, 'cause I think I pretty much use mesquite for everything, but I bought some applewood chips, and some, not mesquite, what's the other? Hickory. But I'm not really sure when to use them.
Well, it all depends on taste.
Okay.
And really, I don't think there's any right or wrong. Some woods give off a heavier smoke. Some woods give off a lighter smoke. Like fruit woods, it's a lighter smoke. So if you don't like as much smoke flavoring, I like a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
So I'm usually a hickory or possibly a pecan.
Okay.
Oak is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm chopping this cherry tree down out back, and I'm planning on using that for smoking. But does the type of cherry also matter, or is it?
I don't think so.
Okay. I wasn't sure if a sweet cherry tree would have a sweeter smoke. I don't know if that's dependent on the wood at all.
Might,
I'm not sure.
I just make sure the wood dries out.
Right.
You don't want to throw green wood, and you never want to use a pine. You want to use hardwoods.
Right. So
maple, oak, hickory, mesquite. A lot of people shy away from mesquite because it burns. It tends to burn a little hotter, and it is a very heavy smoke wood.
Right.
So
yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah. But
I also want to use the chips for smoke. I don't actually burn them. So.
Right.
Hi, honey. Damn it, this thing's going. So Kenneth asked a question. What food, meat or otherwise, would you like to barbecue that you haven't had a chance to yet?
I have not done cheese yet.
Okay.
And I have not done eggs. I would love to smoke some eggs.
So have you done? Last time we talked, I thought you'd mentioned you haven't smoked like tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that.
I've never done vegetables, just like for salsa or anything.
Right. And so that's where I was going with it. With when he asked this question, I hadn't done them. So it was vegetables is what I would like. Now I did after he posted this question. I went and bought a bunch of Roma tomatoes, cut them in half, put them in. I just edged up the tin foil so I'd still save the juice if there was any juice that came out of them. Edged up the tin foil, set them in there, did 2 tins of tomatoes, 1 tin of jalapenos. Same thing. I cut them in half. I cut the stems off, but I leave all the seeds and sticks and all the stickies in there when I smoke stuff. So it turned out fucking amazing.
Yeah, it would.
Steve over here absolutely loved it. The problem is, and you forget about this, when you cook jalapenos, they get hot.
Yeah.
Because they release the oils.
Well,
and son of a gun, that was spicy for just jalapeno salsa.
A smoked jalapeno is a chipotle pepper.
Right.
Well,
what I read, it wasn't just a smoke. They had to be blackened for it to be chipotle.
But that's how you get chipotle peppers. They're smoked and blackened jalapenos.
Right. So these, I didn't blacken them. They were just smoked. So I would still consider them smoked jalapenos, not chipotles. But It was good.
That would be good.
It had just a nice light smoky flavor. I decided not to smoke everything, so I had onions and garlic and all this. I didn't want it to be overpowering.
Yeah.
It turned out really, really good, but yeah, definitely I wouldn't use as many jalapenos because it was hot. Apple, you and your apples.
I'm a lot of
PC
people
guy.
use apple. Going back to the wood types, a lot of people use apple and really like it. I don't. I use it. I mean, on a fruit, when I use like a fruit wood, it's generally for things that are going to take a long time to cook. So a pork shoulder, a brisket, things like that, because it's just going to give. Because I like it. Like I said, I like it. I like a smoky meat.
Right.
So woods that give off a lighter smoke, if it's like 12 hours, whatever, then I get more of that smoky flavor.
Gotcha. So Mark asked again, what you made chocolate chip cookies in your smoker, huh, Troy? Interesting.
Yes. The
cool.
Pellet grills, once they get above
Neat.
300,
I wouldn't think
325, 350,
yeah.
There's very little smoke off the pellets because they burn so clean.
Sure.
So you just
Cook
throw
whatever.
a pie, you just throw a pan of cookies in.
Huh.
They're really kind of a do everything machine. So
yeah, you can see Mark's on there. Mine's already scrolled off. I'm using Linux, which is another topic we'll be doing in a few weeks. But so smoking in the winter. I don't know his exact question, but
what's the best way to smoke when it's winter?
Puff and pass.
If it's, I mean, the colder it is, the more fuel you're going to use, because you have to make up the difference, right, on the temperature. But if you have a clear area that is blocked from the wind, a lot of smokers, you'll see you can buy like these insulated jackets. People make their own out of
smoking jacket. That's great.
Smoking jacket. People will make their own out of shipping blankets.
Sure.
Just a good insulated cover over the lid. And when you're smoking, your temperature is between 200 and 250. Mm-hmm. So where you're trying to capture or conserve the most heat, the temperature of the smoker isn't really all that hot.
Right.
It's not going to light a blanket on fire, for sure.
It would with my luck, because mine's sitting on a wood deck.
Right, and you have an open flame in the bottom of your.
Right.
We're going to get you converted.
Man. I did notice that. What was I making? Oh, I made Salisbury steaks the other day, and I wanted more heat because I just wanted to cook them. I wasn't looking to make them super smoky. But I noticed I turned my flame on high, and it just reeked because it was actually burning against the top of the pan, at the bottom of the pan.
Right.
So it stunk. But
yeah,
I noticed it before it was too late that everything messed up. But funny story, real quick about that, off topic completely. So I'm making this recipe for smoked Salisbury steaks, and they were incredible, except for my one mistake in the recipe that it said 1/4 cup all-purpose sauce. I misread that and put in 1/4 cup all-purpose salt.
You need to be on that show. The worst cooks.
Dude, it still tasted great, but it was just salty, you know.
Yeah.
But
holy shit!
I put in 1/4 cup of Lowry salt, but I think I made 20 pieces of meat out of it, So because I increased the recipe overall and still only used 1/4 cup. But so now I know next time, I'm looking for like sauce, not salt. But they tasted good. I'll make them again because they tasted really good. Faux show. Yeah, whoops. So, looks like our delay's not too bad because Troy's actually answering stuff pretty quick. I want to get to the 3-2-1 ribs method, but we'll talk about that a little later. What's the coolest thing you've ever made in the smoker?
Coolest thing ever in the smoker.
I mean, my opinion for what you've made would either be pork shots, which no one sent me the recipe for, or
I missed that too.
or your beans. They're awesome in your smoker.
Yeah.
So
They're all recipes I found online. Probably the pork shots. Those are always good.
yeah, so I asked Bubba and our friend Mark for the recipe. Neither one of you responded. I know you weren't feeling good that day, but Mark, you have no excuse because you were posting shit on Facebook. So I tried to make my own. I have no clue what's in yours or anything. So I had ground pork. I filled it with barbecue sauce and cheese, and then wrapped them in bacon, and they still turned out
Sounds good to me.
Pretty good, but
Yeah.
but all the recipes I found, they called them pig shots, and they had either sour cream or cream cheese.
Yep.
In them as well.
Yep.
And a lot of them just take a piece of sausage
Yeah.
and wrap it. Where I took ground sausage
Yeah.
and made a cute little bacon shot glass and
Yeah.
filled it with stuff, you know.
I guess you could do it either way.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but now I'd like to see other recipes for pork
Right.
shots. You know, maple flavored pork shots would be pretty good. Jalapeno shots. I mean,
I'll post
know,
a link
so-
in the show notes after.
yeah, they were good.
We get
I
done
wasn't
to
sure
our-
if you guys
our
were
pork
like,
shots.
screw that guy. It's a secret recipe. You know, we're
It
not
ain't no
telling
secret.
him. So
It's as secret as Google.
I could not find pork shots on Google. I found
They're
pig
out there.
shots a lot, but
They're out
and they were literally, they took a piece of like bratwurst and wrapped it in bacon. I'm like, that's not
We use
Bah.
kielbasa, ring bologna or whatever,
right,
and just make a little shot glass with half a slice of bacon,
right,
and then the filling goes in and
huh?
a little rub on top. And
Yeah,
But
I'll
the-
have to check it out because
the fillings is
they're
like
good.
It's like cream cheese, artichoke hearts, chilies, green peppers, jalapenos, cheddar cheese, garlic powder,
Yeah, I'll have to get that
and
recipe.
a lot of love, folks.
A lot of love.
a lot of love. So
I don't put love into my meat. Ugh. What? So on the other side, what's the biggest thing you've flopped in the smoker? While we're waiting,
it's
I can tell you mine.
yeah.
First couple of times I tried smoking stuff, I put the meat in right away instead of letting the smoke burn, and so it always would come out sour because
Okay.
it would have that first burn off, and I would always wet the wood, which is a common misconception, right? So it would just be this soury smoke
Right.
flavor because I would keep the wood moist,
Yeah.
and it didn't taste good.
So, couple things about that. You're looking for a thin blue smoke.
Mark was drinking, yeah.
He does that at work. You're looking for a thin blue. You see that heavy white smoke coming out. Let that burn off a little bit,
Right.
and you want that thin blue smoke. And number two, you don't need to wet your chips.
Right.
Soaking the wood in water before you put it in the smoker doesn't do anything but make steam, and it's no good.
Right. It seems you get better smoke with dry wood anyways.
Yeah,
But,
you
you
do.
know, I was always under the common misconception that
Right.
wet wood smokes more. Well, it might smoke, but it's a crappy smoke.
It's
not a good
it's
smoke.
not the kind of smoke you're looking
Yeah,
for on a
no,
piece of beef.
it was
or
sour.
pork. So don't soak your chips. There's no need. It doesn't do you any good, and actually could mess up supper.
Right.
Just
And now I've smoked meat unintentionally over a barbecue pit, like a fire pit.
right.
But same thing, you know, when I cook with my father-in-law, he thinks you got to have a big fire. So you're always trying to move the meat out of the flame. But I've found, you know, move the meat up higher so it's getting less heat, but it's getting all the smoke from the wood. And it doesn't matter what kind of wood you burn there because in a campfire, it all kind of smells the same. But it turns out good. God, the chicken over a fire like that turns out so good. Yeah. Smoked corn. Oh, yeah,
I'm
baby.
trying to think. I've had stuff that wasn't as good as others, but I don't really know that I've had anything that really flopped. I tried a recipe for these. It was like an Asian style pork rib
Mm-hmm.
and had ginger and soy and all that kind of stuff in it, and they didn't turn out very good. They weren't that probably was a flop. I mean, they were still edible, but they weren't
Right.
very good.
So, here's a question from me. I don't know if it's in here anywhere. Making ribs.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get that dumb membrane off the back, because that's my biggest problem.
Right.
Then I have these ribs that are really hard to eat because that
Right.
membrane's on the back. And
I
I go
think that was
insane in the membrane.
I think that was a question about the membrane. There was a membrane question in there.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
I get insane in the
Always
membrane.
remove the membrane. It's even when your ribs are cooked, it's like eating a piece of paper stuck to the bottom.
Right.
So the easiest way is to get under one end and get part of it started, pulling off with a butter knife or a fingernail against the bone.
Okay.
You're just going to scratch that down and get it, and then grab it, take a napkin or a paper towel, and you can get a grip on it.
Okay.
And then it'll just...
And you do that before you cook it or after you cook it?
Before you cook it.
Okay.
Because that membrane will keep seasoning from getting onto the meat. It's
and that's just on the underside, right?
It's just on the bottom. And it's on pork and beef ribs.
Right.
So if you're going to do either style, there's that membrane, and I always remove it.
Okay. Because I'd like to do ribs again, but that was one of my flops too, because they just tasted like cooked ribs. I mean, it didn't taste anything special because of that being on there. So.
Right. I've had ribs with the membrane on. It's annoying. It's not very... It's got a weird texture.
Yeah, and they seem tough.
It's like I said, it's like a piece of
paper. The meat doesn't fall off the bone like it should, yeah.
And sometimes you don't want it to fall off the bone. Competition ribs, the meat falls off the bone, it's overdone.
Really?
Yep. That's not what you want.
Huh.
You go to a restaurant, they're going to sell you fall off the bone ribs.
Right.
And you can pay...
Lots of money for them.
Lots of money, and you're going to eat them up, and they'll be delicious most of the time.
Right.
But at a barbecue competition, that meat falls off the bone. That's probably not going to win.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Good to know. Good to know. So, Cassie, have you ever smoked a baby back ribs? I think probably the only thing I could come up with.
Baby back ribs. People will smoke a whole suckling pig.
Yeah. Well, I've been offered young deer. So, what do they call them? Deerlings or fawn? Not a fawn, but I don't know. Steve offered me a young deer.
Baby deers.
So, yeah, little smoked Bambi. So, human babies, no, we've never smoked them. Animal babies, yeah, maybe. So, I don't know, baby back ribs. And
we're going to have to stop answering shitty questions.
Hey, I think I brought a pretty good answer to a really weird question. I'm taking it. So Steve asked, one of his questions is, how do you judge when the meat has had enough smoke and go to heat only so that you don't over smoke your meat? For me, the only way I know is when it starts to, what do they call that, where the heat tapers off. That's when I quit adding smoke.
That's generally, there's a couple ways to look at this question. Number one, put as much smoke in it as you like. If you like your meat smoky, smoke away.
Mm-hmm.
But after about 3 or 4 hours, the meat, the inside of the meat's going to stop absorbing that flavor, and you're going to end up with this almost burnt outside that can get a little bitter.
Sure.
Most people in a competition stop it before they're looking for a nice mahogany color on the outside of the meat.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit darker. And a lot of them will take a pork butt and or a brisket, and they'll wrap it either in foil or butcher paper to stop the outside of the meat from getting darker.
Right. Butcher's paper always catches fire in my smoker.
This is why we don't like an open flame.
Well,
but at that point,
it's because the grease spills over into whatever source I have.
At that point, you could really finish it in the oven.
Right.
Right. There's no more smoke. It's in the paper. You're just cooking it until it's done.
Gotcha.
So, like a couple weeks ago, we had a barbecue for family, and we did some pork belly burn ends.
Mm-hmm.
And once we pulled them out, there's a part of that process is putting them in a pan sealed in foil
Right.
with some extra stuff, and we stuck them in the oven because we needed room on the smoker for other stuff.
Right.
And they were done smoking at that point. It was just a matter of continuing that heat to finish.
So is that how the big chain restaurants do it? They smoke them somewhere else and then cook them in the restaurant, right?
It depends. You know, you look at places like the big places like Famous Dave's and that, they have commercial kitchens, you know, and distribution centers where it's all smoked and backpacked and sent out to these kitchens.
Right.
And all they do is reheat it.
Heat it up in a really cool
Not that
kitchen.
it's not good, because I
like Famous Dave's.
I like Famous Dave's. I don't have any issues with Famous Dave's. I don't think I've ever had a bad meal at a Famous Dave's.
I have. But
yeah.
Yeah.
It happened. But anyhow, Famous Dave's is good. It's been a favorite of ours for a long time. But most of that was prepared somewhere else. So
my wife says lighter fluid flavor is her favorite. Yeah.
I've
had that once around here, and I won't say any names.
Is she friends with Cassie?
She might be.
Oh,
she might be.
Boy. Chad says for the membrane, take a fillet knife down the center and pull it back like skinning a catfish. You could probably use skinning pliers even if you wanted to, as long as they weren't the ones that you used on fish the night before.
Would it matter?
If they're clean.
Who cares, though? If you're pulling off the membrane, you're not rubbing them on the meat. You're just pulling off the membrane.
No, and if you washed them.
Yeah, who cares?
You know,
I'd use house pliers. I don't give a shit.
Whatever trips your trigger.
Right.
You know? But.
So then, Brian, he always asks deep questions. So he was talking about a show where they built a smoker shed, 6x6x6 cube with a door, 2x4 frame, corrugated steel walls.
Mm-hmm.
They filled up a firebox with wood, placed it in the center of the shed. Hours later, they took out a piece of meat cooked up. So I'm not sure what the question. Oh, he's just asking what are your thoughts on that. So basically, they're Arctic temperatures, and that'd be considered cold smoking, right? Because they probably don't get over 200 degrees.
It probably was. They were probably cold smoking fish or jerky or something like that.
And what is cold smoking?
Cold smoking is smoking at cold temperatures, you know, and not just cold temperatures, but probably below what the FDA would say is acceptable.
Because that's vegetables, they say to cold smoke them as well.
Right.
So I kept, my smoker was at like 160 degrees.
Right.
And it was actually hard to get smoke at that temperature. But they said cold smoke between 160 and 180. And I would still consider that cooking temperature, but really it's not cookable for meat.
It's not, because remember, whatever's in your smoker will never exceed that temperature.
Right.
You know, if you have a smoker set at 160, your meat or whatever you have in there will never get above 160 degrees.
Right.
It'll be 160 all the way through, but it won't get above that temperature. And that, I don't recommend. There's two parts to that. Like, when you go buy a pack of bacon at the store, it's been cold smoked.
Right. It's cured. Right?
It's cured. It's been cold smoked. I wouldn't try that at home. It's just too risky.
Right.
So when I make bacon, I cure it. I have the pink curing salt at home. I cure it in the fridge for a couple weeks, and then I actually put it on the smoker, and it hits 150 degrees. So it's basically cooked when it comes off the smoker. The bacon you buy at the store is uncooked.
Right. And I know people who eat that.
I've seen it too. I wouldn't do it.
It's gross to me. It's just,
I have a brother that used to do that. I don't know if he still does. To each his own. I wouldn't do it.
Right.
But cold smoking meat and like salamis, if you're going to get into that part, I don't recommend it unless you absolutely know what you're doing.
Right.
Because the bacteria, it can make somebody really, really sick, and you could actually kill somebody
Right.
if you do something wrong.
Yeah.
So until if you're a novice, stay away from cold smoke, with a couple of exceptions. Well, I'll talk about them here in a minute. But if you want to make your own bacon, I would hot smoke it up to about 150, 155 degrees, and then slice it and eat it.
So when you say 150, you're talking internal temperature of
The internal temperature of the
meat. Yeah.
Yep. So
all right.
The exceptions to cold smoking, there are, I would do nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Throw some almonds in a pan and just get some smoke on them. And you could even raise the temperature up into the 120s, 130, just to,
But it's hard to get smoke at that temperature. Unless, hard to get smoke with my fuel source at that temperature.
If you're so at that temperature, you're either using very little charcoal or wood, or a very low flame, or you have something. They make a product out there. It's called an Amazon tube, and there are other knockoffs like it. It's a mesh tube. It's a stainless steel mesh tube that you fill with pellets and light the end, and it just smolders and puts off lots and lots of smoke.
Okay,
that's all it does. And that's the same thing you would use for my other exception for cold smoking, which is cheese. Cold smoked cheese, it's best to do it in the wintertime. You don't want the inside of your smoker to go above
you don't want
80 or 90 degrees, or your cheese is going to melt.
Right.
So, if it's a 40-degree day, that's a perfect day to smoke cheese with an Amazon tube or something like that.
Now you could do that with a box smoker pretty easily too, right? Because you can make a lot of smoke in that box.
You can make a lot of smoke
without
in the bottom,
making the heat.
Right.
Yeah.
So the smoldering of the pellets will raise the temperature inside a little bit, and even if it gets into the 70s, you're still okay with cheese.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get above 80 to 90 degrees, and your cheese starts to melt.
And you want to use a hard cheese.
Generally want to use a
right?
hard cheese.
A little harder to melt.
I've heard of people smoking mozzarella,
mm-hmm.
which is generally a very soft cheese. I've not tried it. I have not smoked cheese, and it's something I really want to do. And
I think this winter we should give it a shot.
Even with if you're going to use like the tube, you could do it in the grill. Like if you have a gas grill, and just not use your heat source, you're just not going to light the grill. You're just going to set everything in the grill on, little racks or whatever, and fire up those pellets and get some smoke out of it. That'd work too. And then when your for cheese especially, when your cheese is done,
Jesus,
you don't want to eat it right away. You want the smoke to soak in and mellow, so you're just going to wrap it or backpack it and stick it in the fridge for a couple weeks. Okay. And at that point, it's ready to eat.
So a couple weeks. Oh, man.
Yep. Well, good barbecue takes time. Paul Opper. I see you.
What? Who?
Paul Opper.
Mine didn't pop up on that. Man. Sorry for the mess in the garage, too. Eventually we'll have all that cleaned up. So, I think, that's all the questions we had on here, right? That I saw.
I think so.
So the one thing that Bubba wanted me to talk about, and this actually came from his brother, Chad, is how did charcoal start? And I'm not going to read this whole article. We'll link to it. But it basically comes down to Ford and who are all those other guys? Ford and Edison and Firestone, all those guys. And we're talking Henry Ford, not Harrison Ford. So they're all hanging out together, whatever. And what the hell's the guy's name? Kingsford, right? So they're all hanging out together, and they bought some of this land to do some stuff with and to do foresting with. And they decided they had all this extra wood waste that they were too cheap to get rid of. They wanted to use it. So it all comes down to, and again, this is really high level. They chipped up the wood, compressed it, mixed it in with some tar and some other things, and made charcoal briquettes. And first they were just kind of like, oh, we use it for this and for that. Eventually they're like, okay, we can make more money with this, and they mass marketed it. They originally gave it away with some cars, right, and said, hey, here's a picnic on the go. You can have a heat source and take your new car and go out and eat somewhere and cook it right there.
Yep.
And, then they started marketing it to stores and things like that. And so that's really high level on how briquettes came to be. It came from wood waste that they decided they wanted to do something with and make some money on. So it's kind of a cool thing. I always thought charcoal briquettes were literally made just of coal. And, maybe they are more so now. I don't know.
They're still pretty much the same. It's a wood byproduct. But to make the little uniform lumps of charcoal, they use filler materials and bonding agents.
Right.
So there's a huge, like when you read through barbecue forums, there are guys that only use briquettes, and then there's guys that only use what's called lump charcoal, which is actual charcoal.
Coal, right?
It's not coal.
Coal and charcoal are different things.
Now, Rob, if we had a barbecue with coal,
it'd be pretty nasty.
We'd all be dead.
All right.
Charcoal is charred wood.
Yes, sir. Fucking fuck.
But so lump charcoal is actually charred wood.
I feel like the dumb blonde now.
You're not the dumb blonde. But I'll make sure I'll make some coal for you. Something out of coal. Or I'll just put it in your stocking or something. Coal goes in stockings. Charcoal goes in smokers.
Gotcha.
All right?
Son of a bitch. And then I wanted to talk about something you showed me, the 3-2-1 ribs method. And it's a Facebook page. And I mean,
they're all over.
It's an ideal, but
you can. And some people have shortened it to 2-2-1 or 2-1-1 or 3-1-1. Basically, you're going to take your ribs and put them on a smoker. All right?
Yep.
For 3 hours. You're going to pull that membrane, season the ribs any way you want. Use your favorite rub, salt, pepper, whatever you want. You're going to put them in your smoker for 3 hours. And let them smoke. That's all you got to do. You sit back, have a beer.
Or whatever.
For 3 hours.
Okay.
At the 3 hour mark, you're going to wrap them up in foil, usually with some extra stuff. Brown sugar, butter, honey, apple juice, maybe a little Mountain Dew, whatever you got. Because you're going to seal them up in foil and braise the meat at that point to get them really, really tender for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you're going to unwrap them, put them back on the smoker, usually with some barbecue sauce on top or some type of glaze.
Yep.
For an hour. And that's the 3-2-1 method. 3 hours, 2 hours, and 1 hour.
Right. It worked pretty well when I tried it the one time. So
it does.
Except
work.
for that, it didn't cut the
well.
membrane off.
And it's, some people call it cheating. Some people just take ribs and throw them on the smoker, and when they're done, they're done.
Right. I find though
works.
that every type of meat has a method that works well for beginners or advanced. If you want to hash out a bunch of ribs and you want them to be consistent, 3-2-1 works great because you can keep track of everything and when it gets done. So
it does.
Pretty cool.
So 3-2-1, they usually say you're smoking at 225. If you're going to go 2-2-1, maybe you're smoking at 250, 275.
Right.
At a higher temp. You kind of just have to play around and find the amount of time and the temperature that works best for you. But I would start with 225, 3-2-1.
Now, will the meat fall off the bone at 3-2-1?
Nope.
Really? Cool.
On the ends, you'll find the bones. Some of the bones just pull out.
Right.
But
that's different. Yeah.
A lot of competition teams use a 3-2-1 or variation, and they put out perfect ribs every Saturday.
Cool. So I don't see any more questions on here. I see Chad's going to try making some habanero chocolate.
That'd be good.
Yeah, we'll see how that turns out. I'm ready, Chad. When you want to bring it up, or we can come down, whatever. But I don't see any other questions on here. So my last question is, when's dinner?
Oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah, it's good. Good stuff.
Fire up the smoker and throw some hot dogs in there.
I see. No,
No.
that doesn't sound as good to me. I don't know. But you know,
Who doesn't like smoky wieners?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I like to have my wiener smoked, but that's totally different. But yeah, I can't wait. You know, Mark's talking about doing another thing here sometime in the next month or so,
Thinking about maybe Labor Day.
Yeah, so I'm down for that. You know,
I think we're gonna. Well, you and I have talked about getting that sausage stuffer out. And
oh yeah,
doing some
making
some bratwurst.
I made all that stuff too to do it, and
or some ring bologna that we would hot smoke to a internal temperature of done, and so we didn't get botulism. But yeah, that would be.
Yeah, you know, and I made that stuff, and I bet you it's freezer burnt by now.
Oh yeah, maybe.
But I don't know if smoking that would be okay anyways.
Probably just tastes a little funky.
Right, but I might give it a shot. The problem is, so I put it
burnt.
I put it in the freezer, and then I put some other meat in the freezer, and I forgot to label it. So now I'm really not sure which one is my sausage, which one is just pork. So yeah, because I bought a meat grinder for my wife bought me a KitchenAid, so I have a meat grinder, a sausage stuffer, and the membranes to stuff them with, and I'd love to try it. I've heard that's a talent on its own too, that they tear and everything else. You know, and
I'd like to try it because I've got a recipe for kielbasa that.
So I say we take a Sunday, and maybe even I don't want to do it in a dirty garage, but you know, maybe set up a webcam and just record us giving it a shot.
We'll do it in the bathroom.
Yeah, no, I know what happens in there too.
Oh,
yeah, ishy. They even say don't keep your toothbrushes in there. I ain't making meat.
We'll do it in the kitchen. Somewhere.
Be a good spot for it.
But yeah, that'd be
pretty cool.
That'd be pretty cool. I'm down for that.
So. Awesome. You got anything else to add to this one?
I don't think I do.
I think this was good.
I think it was good.
Chock full of information.
And there's still lots more information out there. I guess if you're looking to get started with barbecue, I would.
Fucking Chad.
He's always got something.
I am not commenting a damn thing because I promised I wouldn't.
Smoking wieners.
Don't tag me.
Anyhow, if you're looking to get started in barbecue, I would generally stay away from an offset and a propane smoker. If you really want a really basic smoke, just go for the electric. If that's your
I'd rather have propane than electric, only because I know how much it takes to make an electric element hot and to keep it hot. Right. Propane, I like it because I can adjust it, and it stays pretty consistent.
If you could find a smoker that will seal off that flame from the rest of the smoker,
right,
then you'll be all right.
I like mine because the pans are bigger than the flame. So the only problem I ever have is when I go and put water in the drip pan and it's dry, because then it shoots
that's a bad idea.
The grease up, you know. But I shut the flame off, close the door, it's gone, it's done, you know.
If you think you're up to the challenge of learning a little bit, I would look at a small upright smoker that uses charcoal. A small Weber Smoky Mountain, if you want a true smoker. Now, people, you can smoke meat on a Weber kettle grill.
Mm-hmm.
It's just indirect heat. You put all the charcoal on one side and your food on the other side, and you have indirect heat. Throw a little wood on those charcoals to get some smoke.
That's how I used to. I actually did that on a gas grill. I would put wood chips on a pan on top of my burners.
Yep.
But you know,
And you can do that. The hard part about a gas grill is keeping that temperature down, because
Right.
even on low, my gas grill is 300 degrees.
right.
But you know, for as low as like $100, you can start learning how to charcoal smoke. And the reason I like charcoal is because it's slow burning. The temperature is regulated by the amount of airflow through the smoker, and it's safe. I would, you know, there's no open flame unless you've got wood on there and you're gonna hold the lid open for a little while and that wood catches fire. But charcoal doesn't burn with a flame.
Right.
It burns with an ember.
Yes. Yeah.
You look at that. It's just, that's where I would start, because I think if you're gonna try an upright electric or propane, I think at some point you're gonna want to move on.
Right. I already do, but I feel bad because Krista bought this thing for me so long ago. I just started using it this year, so I want to get some good use out of it.
Sure.
Learn how to do some of this stuff, and then move up to something a little more complex, because I don't have patience for tedious tasks. So I'm afraid with a charcoal smoker, I'll get pissed off because I'm not babysitting it like I need to.
It's all airflow. It's all about
Right.
airflow. If your smoker's too hot, it's getting too much air.
Right.
If it's too cold, it's not getting enough air, or
Yeah.
you're out of fuel.
Right.
So, but I'll show you.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll get on it. Now, Mark said, too, to talk about spare ribs, baby back ribs, and St. Louis ribs.
Sure.
I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what the two are, baby backs and spare ribs. But
Right. So, on a pig, the ribs come down the side, and they're yay long
Right.
on the side of the pig. And they cut the top half from the bottom half as they sit on the pig.
Yep.
Top half is the baby back ribs, or loin back ribs,
Okay.
because they sit on top of the loin.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
That's where the pork loin comes out,
Okay.
or where the pork loin is. Maybe the loin sits on. You know, I've never cut open a pig to find out.
I could care
So
less
anyhow,
about
that's
the
that's
anatomy.
the loin back ribs. They're generally, well, depending how they're butchered, they can have as little or as much meat as the butcher leaves, which is why beef back ribs are usually pretty scarce, meat wise.
Sure. Bigger bones, right?
Bigger bones, and that's the prime rib.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and the beef,
Gotcha.
like the tail end of that is the beef tenderloin.
Right.
So they get as much of that off as they can.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
So the top half of that is the loin back ribs. The bottom half of that is the spare rib. And a rack of spare ribs can be, a couple feet long and a foot wide,
Right.
because there's a skirt along one edge of there's some cartilage in there, and that's, generally though, majority of it is just plain rib meat.
Okay.
So that's there. Competition cooks and a lot of people will just cut that off and use it for sausage, or they'll smoke it and throw it in the beans, or
Sure.
whatever. If you buy a rack of spare ribs with that already removed, that's a St. Louis cut.
Okay.
That's what they call a St. Louis cut slab of spare ribs.
Okay. So it's just taking off that stuff that you
That you might not, that you don't want, but you don't.
It's got enough meat on it to flavor some stuff, but it's
Right.
not.
Right.
It's got that
When-
cartilage crap
like
that you
if
don't want to
you-
eat.
If you go into a barbecue restaurant and order rib tips,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're getting.
Okay.
They'll take a whole rack of spares, and they'll cut that part off and smoke it, because it's got little cartilage
Right.
there at the tip of each rib.
Yeah, I know. I try to eat it and it doesn't work.
Yeah, you
It's
gotta
gross.
Pick
Yeah.
those out and whatever.
Yuck.
Usually pretty tender, flavorful, but if you just want a rack of already prepared ribs, get a St. Louis style.
All right. Cool.
There's another style that's got some of the front ribs on it, and they call those country style ribs.
Oh yeah.
Those are actually not allowed in KCBS competition.
Really?
Yep, you have to use loin back or
Okay.
spare ribs. And on the spare ribs, it's St. Louis cut or it doesn't matter.
Right.
But
Cool.
you have to put at least 6 servings in the box. So
All right. Awesome. Well, it looks like that's about all we've got for this week. If you have other questions, post them out here. We'll be more than happy to answer them for you.
Shoot us a message, post on our Facebook, direct message, text. We don't have a Twitter. We don't have an Instagram either.
No, I don't use much of those anyways. Nah. So, but our next week topic, we're going to talk about the timeline of cellular and pocket devices, Android versus Apple versus Windows, Palm Pilots. I don't even know what a Newton is, Blackberries. But we're going to talk about all that stuff. So if you have questions, not can you replace my screen questions, but
not have you ever smoked an iPhone?
Right. Well, I have. I've smoked a lot of phones, but not on purpose. But if you have some questions about cellular devices and cellular technologies, things like that, give us a holler. We're going to answer them for you. Going to try and clean up our background here a little bit.
We're going to need
it just is what it
someone
is,
with painting talent,
right,
to make us a backdrop.
Yeah, well,
maybe a green screen.
That
would be fun.
I have an idea for some other stuff too, but we'll talk about that another time.
I'm not sure I want to hear that.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Again, this podcast will be published in a little bit. The Facebook Live video will be back online here shortly, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for the questions. And
my last words of advice: you don't actually smoke Famunda cheese; you just put it on a sandwich, man.
Yuck.
So, all right. Keep it low and slow, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Take care. See ya.